When footage of Nicolas Maduro in handcuffs aboard a U.S. military aircraft hit Chinese social media platforms, something unprecedented happened. Within hours, the hashtag suggesting China should use the same method to reclaim Taiwan had gained over 440 million views on Weibo. But behind this viral moment lies a far more complex strategic calculation that could reshape the entire balance of power in the Pacific. The images streaming out of Caracas weren't just shocking to American audiences, they sent seismic waves through Beijing's corridors of power, where strategists have been gaming out Taiwan scenarios for decades. According to multiple reports from regional analysts, the speed and precision of the Venezuela operation has fundamentally altered Chinese perceptions of American military capabilities and political willingness to act unilaterally. To understand why Venezuela matters so much to Taiwan, you have to look beyond the headlines about regime change and oil reserves. This is about the establishment of a new precedent in international relations, one where great powers can justify military intervention in their perceived spheres of influence by citing domestic security concerns. Trump's invocation of the Monroe Doctrine isn't just about Latin America, it's a blueprint that authoritarian regimes around the world are now studying with intense interest. The conversation on Chinese social media has been remarkably candid. Users aren't just celebrating Maduro's downfall, they're explicitly connecting it to Taiwan policy. One widely shared comment read, "I suggest using the same method to reclaim Taiwan in the future." Another stated, "Since the U.S. doesn't take international law seriously, why should we care about it?" These aren't fringe voices. They represent a growing sentiment among Chinese netizens who see the Venezuela operation as validation of a more aggressive approach to territorial disputes. But the strategic implications run much deeper than social media commentary. According to sources familiar with internal deliberations in Beijing, Chinese military planners have been conducting urgent assessments of what they witnessed in Venezuela. The operation showcased American capabilities that many in China's defense establishment didn't fully appreciate. The ability to conduct a precision decapitation strike with over 150 aircraft, extract a head of state, and face virtually no international consequences represents a level of power projection that has serious implications for Chinese strategic planning. The timing of this operation is particularly significant when viewed through the lens of recent developments in the Taiwan Strait. Just last week, China conducted massive live-fire exercises completely encircling Taiwan, reportedly in response to a record $11.1 billion U.S. arms package to Taipei. These exercises were seen as Beijing's most aggressive military display around the island in recent memory. Now, in the wake of Venezuela, Chinese military analysts are reassessing whether their show of force was sufficient or whether the United States has demonstrated that it's prepared to escalate far beyond what Beijing anticipated. There's also the uncomfortable reality of technological exposure. The same Chinese radar and anti-aircraft systems that failed spectacularly to detect American stealth aircraft in Venezuela have been sold to dozens of countries around the world. According to defense analysts, this represents a massive intelligence windfall for the Pentagon and a corresponding embarrassment for Beijing's defense industry. When your cutting-edge military technology can't protect a close ally from American special operations, it raises serious questions about your ability to defend your own strategic interests. What's particularly striking about the Chinese response is the contrast between official condemnation and popular enthusiasm. While Beijing's foreign ministry issued the standard diplomatic protests about violations of sovereignty and international law, the response from ordinary Chinese citizens has been markedly different. They see the Venezuela operation not as a violation of norms, but as a demonstration of how great powers actually behave when their core interests are at stake. This disconnect reveals something important about the Chinese strategic mindset. For years, Beijing has been constrained by its own rhetoric about peaceful rise and respect for sovereignty. But the Venezuela operation demonstrates that when push comes to shove, the United States is willing to abandon these principles entirely in pursuit of strategic objectives. Chinese observers are now asking whether their own adherence to these norms has been naive. The regional implications are profound. According to analysis from Taiwan-based researchers, the island's leadership is taking the Venezuela precedent very seriously. If the United States can justify military action against Venezuela by citing drug trafficking and terrorism, what's to stop China from citing separatist activities and foreign interference to justify similar action against Taiwan? The parallels are uncomfortably close. There's also the question of alliance dynamics. The Venezuela operation was conducted unilaterally without seeking permission from international bodies or even close allies. This represents a fundamental shift from the multilateral approach that has characterized American foreign policy for decades. For Taiwan, which relies heavily on international support and the perception that any Chinese action would face global condemnation, this shift is deeply concerning. Chinese strategists are also paying close attention to the global response or lack thereof. While countries like Russia and Iran issued predictable condemnations, the response from American allies has been notably muted. European leaders have expressed concerns about international law while simultaneously acknowledging that Maduro's removal might be beneficial for Venezuelan democracy. This lukewarm reaction suggests that the international community may be more willing to accept unilateral action by great powers than previously assumed. The economic dimensions of the Venezuela operation add another layer to Chinese calculations. By taking control of the world's largest oil reserves, the United States has potentially disrupted a key component of China's energy security strategy. Venezuela has been sending over 600,000 barrels per day to China, representing about 4% of Beijing's total oil imports. This was more than just a commercial relationship. It was an insurance policy against American pressure on other energy suppliers. The loss of Venezuelan oil is manageable for China in purely economic terms, but the strategic implications are more significant. It demonstrates American willingness to disrupt Chinese supply chains and economic partnerships through military action. For Beijing, this raises the stakes considerably in any potential Taiwan scenario. Would the United States be willing to impose similar economic costs on China if it moved against Taiwan? The Venezuela precedent suggests the answer might be yes. Perhaps most importantly, the Venezuela operation has highlighted the limits of Chinese global influence. Despite years of investment and diplomatic engagement in Latin America, Beijing was unable to prevent or respond to American military action in what it considered friendly territory. This has serious implications for Chinese credibility as a global power and ally. If China can't protect its partners in Latin America, can it realistically project power in the Western Pacific against determined American opposition? The timing of Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent comments about Taiwan reunification being unstoppable now appears prescient rather than merely rhetorical. According to intelligence assessments cited by regional media, Beijing may see a narrowing window of opportunity to act before American military superiority becomes even more pronounced. The Venezuela operation has demonstrated capabilities that may not have been fully apparent to Chinese planners before. There's also the question of technological and intelligence cooperation. The speed and precision of the Venezuela operation suggests a level of intelligence penetration and operational coordination that would be extremely difficult to replicate in other contexts. Chinese analysts are now forced to assume that American intelligence capabilities in the Pacific may be far more extensive than previously understood. The domestic political implications within China are also significant. The Communist Party has built much of its legitimacy around the promise of national rejuvenation and the eventual reunification with Taiwan. If the Venezuela precedent suggests that the United States is prepared to use overwhelming force to prevent challenges to its sphere of influence, it puts enormous pressure on Chinese leadership to demonstrate that they can achieve their stated objectives. However, there are also reasons why the Venezuela model might actually restrain Chinese action rather than encourage it. Unlike Maduro, who was widely seen as illegitimate even among his own people, Taiwan's democratic government enjoys broad popular support. A Chinese operation to remove Taiwan's leadership would likely unite the island's population in opposition rather than liberation. This fundamental difference in political legitimacy makes the Venezuela playbook much less applicable to the Taiwan context. Additionally, the geographic and logistical challenges of a Taiwan operation are orders of magnitude more complex than Venezuela. While American forces could operate from friendly bases throughout Latin America, any Chinese action against Taiwan would face a distributed network of American and allied forces throughout the Pacific. The risk of escalation to full-scale great power conflict is correspondingly higher. Looking ahead, the Venezuela operation appears to have accelerated Chinese military planning timelines rather than fundamentally altering strategic objectives. According to regional security analysts, Beijing is now operating under the assumption that the window for peaceful reunification with Taiwan is closing more rapidly than previously anticipated. This could lead to more aggressive Chinese actions in the near term, but it could also result in miscalculations that neither side intends. The ultimate question is whether the Venezuela precedent represents a new normal in great power competition or an aberration driven by specific circumstances. For Chinese planners, the safest assumption is probably the former. If the United States is willing to use military force unilaterally to secure its strategic objectives in Latin America, there's no reason to believe it wouldn't do the same in the Pacific. The conversation happening on Chinese social media platforms reflects this harder-edged reality. The era of hoping that international law and diplomatic norms would constrain great power competition appears to be ending. What's replacing it is a much more transactional and potentially dangerous approach to territorial disputes and spheres of influence. As we move forward, the challenge for both Washington and Beijing will be managing this new dynamic without stumbling into a conflict that neither side wants, but both sides may be preparing for. The Venezuela operation has changed the rules of the game in ways that will reverberate far beyond Latin America. How China responds in the Taiwan Strait may determine whether those changes lead to greater stability through deterrence or greater instability through miscalculation. The viral response on Chinese social media is just the visible tip of a much larger strategic iceberg. Beneath the surface, both governments are now recalibrating their approaches based on what they witnessed in Caracas. The ultimate implications of that recalibration won't be clear for months or even years, but the trajectory appears to be toward greater confrontation rather than greater cooperation. Whether this represents the beginning of a new era of great power competition or simply a more honest acknowledgement of dynamics that were always present remains to be seen. What's clear is that the rules of international engagement have shifted in ways that make the Taiwan question more urgent and potentially more dangerous than it was before Nicolas Maduro found himself in handcuffs aboard an American military aircraft.